So here's the thing. It's Halloween yet again, and as such, I decided to throw a little get-together with me and my friends. But besides all that, I still got time to talk to you for a bit. You know, after doing all sorts of research on Doom for my last video, I had my curiosity piqued. See, given how the series is talked about, people who aren't really fans of the games would probably be led to believe that the franchise had Doom 1 and 2, a large gap, then Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Well, kind of. Truth is, there's a good few major Doom games between those two that I believe are treated pretty unfairly, and after playing through so many different Doom games for my Doom Iceberg video, I decided if no one else is going to talk about them, then I will. And then a much bigger YouTuber than me made a video about one of these games, but damn it, I'm in too deep now. So, let's give these quality games their due time, and let's talk about the forgotten Doom game.
Hey, I know you're doing a thing here, but you kinda invited us over. Are we gonna do anything?
Here. Watch Halloween 3.
Ooh!
Now, as I was saying, let's talk about the forgotten Doom games. The first stop on our tram tour of terror is Doom 64. Out of the games we're talking about today, this is the one that's most like the classic Doom games. Doom 64 was released in 1997 for the, you guessed it, Sega Saturn. The game wasn't developed by id Software, but Midway, though id did supervise the creation of the game. The whole point of the game was, effectively, to hold Doom fans over while id worked on the first 3 Quake games. Despite having some elements that are similar to the first 2 Doom games, Doom 64 is very much its own game. It's got its own level design, its own music, or lack thereof, and even its own monsters. That being said, it does still borrow a lot from the original Doom games. I was even able to recognize a few level designs that were lifted straight out of Doom 1 and 2. But to me, the game's strength is in its differences. Take, for example, the art style of the game. While Doom 1 and 2 are bright and colorful, representing the game's lighter tone and rocking soundtrack, Doom 64 is grim, it's dark, it's muddy. The soundtrack isn't metal, it's this low, droning ambiance that's genuinely unnerving. Another interesting thing is the monster designs, which can look very different from the classic designs we're used to. Not that I'm complaining, I love the new look, and some of them I like even more than their classic designs. The Pain Elemental, for example, is wildly different, and despite the game being dingier, I like the more vibrant colors of the Arachnotron. The story, as you could expect, is pretty simple. You are a man with gun. This is a demon. Commences the slaughter. Yeah, if I had one major complaint with the game, is that there's obviously some dissonance between the gameplay and atmosphere of the game. The art and music is telling me to be afraid and on my toes. I'm completely alone, surrounded by monsters from another world who could be around any corner, ready to tear me to shreds. And the gameplay is telling me to blow their Lovecraftian heads off with a shotgun. Creatures beyond description. I got a description for them. Dead. Of course, that's not that big of a problem for a Doom game. You kinda know what you're signing up for gameplay-wise, and if the only problem is the music, you can mute the TV or whatever to put on your own music. Or a podcast, if you want to get really tonally dissonant.
But then how dare you deprive that person of his last 8 hours or 10 hours of life?
I don't care, because it's the last day on Earth.
What would you do?
I've always wanted to kick a duck up the arse.
Where my real problem with this game lies is the level design. Now, I expect some sort of maze-like level design in my Doom games, that's just kinda how it works. But some of the stuff this game makes you do is really asinine. Take this room for example. You need to get this yellow key. Pushing this button lowers the platform, and pushing this one opens the gate. But stepping up to the buttons causes the cage to fall or the platform to raise respectively. So what do you have to do? Maybe find a sweet spot where you can hit the button without triggering it? Or hey, since the game has buttons you can activate by shooting them, you just have to shoot the buttons. Nope. You gotta leave the room, go to this random-ass wall decoration that doesn't even look like a button, and press it, because it's a button. There's a few times this game pulls that kind of shit actually. Not enough to hurt the game, mind you, but enough to make me roll my eyes when I realize, shit, what's the thing I'm missing here? Most of the puzzles aren't so bullshit. In fact, it's kind of refreshing to have relatively more engaged puzzles than what some of the older games have, but there's some moments that feel like they're just there to have something happen. Take this part of the second level where you hit this button and have to slowly wait as this thing rises and crashes down a few times. They even lock you in the room. You have no choice but to sit there and watch it. I get that's probably a safety measure to make sure people don't miss it, since this is where you have to go, but 1, it's kinda hard to miss, and 2, I feel like there may have been a more organic way to do that. However, the biggest problem with the game is unfortunately something beyond typical game design. Because remember, that 64 in the title means something, and it means it's supposed to be played with this thing. The Nintendo 64 controller has a lot of problems, but for this game the controls can really be a bit of a pain. Now, the twin-stick control scheme wasn't really a thing until Alien Resurrection in 2000, and wasn't even really popularized until Halo a year later, so even if this had dual analog sticks, it wouldn't have played like a modern FPS. But still, the controls are so fucking weird. Because of the layout of the N64 controller, they couldn't, say, make the left and right triggers strafe you left and right and have Z fire, because you wouldn't be able to reach the Z button or the control stick while having your fingers at the ready on the triggers. It just wouldn't be physically possible. So instead, the joystick moves you forward, back, and turns you, like tank controls. Holding down the R button moves you left and right, and holding down the C button moves you in a circle. It's about as clunky as you would expect. All that, plus the fact that the N64 placed second in its generation to the absolute might of the PS1, is probably why it's often overlooked as far as Doom games go. I remember when I was a younger lad, I would test this game out every now and then when I first learned about emulation, and I could not get past the first level. Now, the controls aren't so bad when you get used to it, and I'm sure at the time they weren't so bad, but putting yourself back into that time frame when things were less figured out, and again, the struggle of getting used to it, is kind of why the game fell into relative obscurity. That was until March 2020 when, unexpectedly, the game got ported to modern consoles and PC, with modern controls and even widescreen. It was a pre-order bonus for Doom Eternal, but can be bought separately and even includes a few new levels. All around, it's a really damn good port, and the modern controls for the game make it just so much easier to hop in and play. Well, enough of this stupid, lame Nintendo 64 game. Let's get to where the real action's at. A 2005 mobile game. Doom RPG. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this one's in the video just because of how absurd it is. So when I was making the Iceberg video, I was doing some research on Doom RPG and found out that some madman had single-handedly ported the game to PC. Not on an emulator, this is running natively on my computer. That is so ridiculous, I love it. So, out of pure respect for the hustle, we're talking about that one next. Doom RPG is a mobile game that was released all the way back in 2005. For all you tiny tots that were mere fetuses at the time, holy shit, that'd mean you're like 17 now, what the hell, a phone back then typically looked like this. While I wasn't around for the N64, I do vividly remember fucking around with my siblings' old Samsung, so it's easier to put my mind back in a time where the top mobile games were games like King Kong, the official mobile game of the movie, New York Knights, Success in the City, and EA Sports TM Tiger Woods PGA Golf Registered Golf 2005. Okay, in all seriousness, the game was meant to tie into Doom 3, and seeing how the developers realized an FPS on something that was honestly probably less powerful than a Game Boy Advance wouldn't work out, a first-person RPG was probably the best move. So, does it hold up? Kinda. The game is played on a grid system. You can turn 90 degrees or move forward and back. Everything in this game is turn-based. Everything moves only when you move. There's also no battle screens or anything like that. All the combat happens in the overworld. Something that did actually surprise me a bit. It goes to make the game feel a bit more like a classic Doom game. Oh, but don't you worry, this bad boy's called an RPG for a reason. As you go through the world, complete quests, and kill enemies, you'll get your experience points, level up, and get shit like more health, more defense, typical RPG stuff. And yes, you did hear me right, there are quests in this game because there's NPCs. I'd comfortably say that this is probably the most populated Doom game out there, seeing how you can talk to basically every NPC you see, and they'll usually say something important to your current objective. I know all this stuff is very simple and basic, the shit you'd expect from an RPG, but I'm just in shock because it's Doom. It's exactly what the title says, it's an honest-to-God Doom RPG. There's even a shop where you can buy healing items and upgrades and shit. You even have to equip your weapons and everything. Speaking of, there's a few original weapons made just for this game, like your melee is a fire axe. I'm surprised how alright they fit into the art style. Like, you can kinda tell they were made 10 years after the original sprites, but you can ignore it. At the time, the game was a smash hit and even got a sequel, and in all honesty, I can see why. And while it can be a little fun today, it certainly at least kept my attention. It is a bit antiquated. You can't spec into any of the things you level up in, you just kind of get numbers that kinda feel like they do things. Like, health I get, and accuracy, yeah, looking back I missed more shots when I started, but like, what the fuck does agility mean in a game like this? That I can move from one tile to another slightly faster? There's also absolutely no music in the game outside of the title screen and when you level up. I believe at the time they could only play one sound file at a time, which would certainly explain that. I do like how the intro recreates a few shots from the intro of Doom 3 though. That's an attention to detail I can appreciate. But in the grand scheme of things, I'd say that Doom RPG is just a novelty to the modern day. Nothing really worth going back to other than to chuckle at how times have changed. And that brings us to the main event, boys and girls, the biggest outlier in the entire Doom franchise, Doom 3. Doom 3 is undoubtedly the black sheep of the franchise, though it's still considered a good game in its own right, it's just seen as an odd one out. And if you've watched me for a while, you'll know those are my favorite kinds of games. As a bit of a spoiler, Doom 3 is not my favorite of the series, but I'd argue that there is something to the game that is unfortunately being lost when people skip over it. So, Doom 3 was released in 2004 as a reboot of the series. It's kinda weird that they would call it Doom 3 when in reality it was more like a remake of Doom 1, but hey, it was 2004. Video game reboots and remakes were still kind of a new thing. In it, you play as this guy, going through the traditional Doom story, but instead of blasting demons to chunks with a double-barrel shotgun, you're blasting demons to chunks with a normal shotgun. But now it's darker and you have a flashlight. Ooh. All jokes aside, Doom 3 is obviously going for a very different tone than the classic Doom games. Gone are the days of heavy metal and this fucker's big toothy grin. We're in survival horror territory, baby. But like, reasonable survival horror. You'll generally have enough ammo to deal with whatever's being thrown at you. Doom 3 also focuses on actually having a story, which means that it is very unlike porn. So let's talk about the story, I guess. In this, you play as Guy, first named Doom, who just arrived on Mars City, a research base headed by the UAC Corporation. After a bit of walking around and meeting fun robot friends, your soul flies out of your body as we meet Professor Evilman. His personality includes acting mysterious around other people and saying cryptic and threatening things.
I will need full access,
Professor Evilman.
Delta included. I won't have any difficulties doing that, will I?
Only if you get lost.
Dr. Goodman!
Just stay out of my way. Amazing things will happen here soon. You just wait.
This man is so blatantly an evil mad scientist, I'm surprised he does not have a German accent. He's currently yelling at Dr. Goodman about how this stupid board of directors must keep their grubby paws off his scientific research. And we just kinda move on to meet this guy, Mr. Strongboy, and he tells us, hey, go to this area and stop this crazy guy. So we do that, and well, what do you know, today's the day that someone decided to open up health portals and now we gotta deal with that shit. So we go throughout the game, occasionally getting objectives to do, and even more occasionally meeting new people. Where I acted to as I figured Doom Guy would.
I can't believe I found you.
It's at about this point that I found probably my favorite feature of the game. See, when you kill a demon or whatever, they usually just fade away. What happens when you start punching a corpse? Well, in most games, nothing. But this ain't most games. I can't really explain why, but this just tickled me pink when I first realized this would happen to every corpse. I think this was because the game was going for a more serious and realistic tone, and yet pretty much everybody in the game could be popped like a balloon. Punching a corpse just kind of became my go-to reaction to seeing one after I found this out because it never stopped being so ridiculous to me. One time even caused it to happen to a fucking skeleton, organs and all. Oh yeah, this game's only mostly stable. It's rare, but sometimes a very bizarre bug would take place, like these enemies having a nice three-way dance, or this fellow here just going off on a lovely walk. There are a few moments I feel like are meant to be intentionally funny though.
Hey you! Can you help me? I'm trapped in here! Release the door locks and get me out! What? Eddie! Eddie! Ah!
Doom 3 is mainly a horror game though, and its creatures are meant to spook you. Maybe it's because I'm a big, strong man, but most of these guys didn't really affect me much. Well, except for one type of enemy. This thing, called a trite, really gave me the fucking willies. I'm about as arachnophobic as a normal person, so seeing a giant knee-high spider thing freaks me out. But the whole design is just creepy. The upside-down human head, the many black eyes, the weird legs that look like stretched bony fingers. God, it's so creepy. It brings forth the same feelings as seeing the head in The Thing, but it's worse, because at least there we knew that that was being altered. This is just what this creature is. It's disgusting. The size also really irks me. With things like imps or demons or whatever, yeah, they're big and they can probably tear me apart, but they'd at least be easy to spot and run away from. These things are just big enough to pose a threat, but just small enough to be able to hide in a lot of places. Makes you want to play the game with your legs off the ground. I guess the same could be said for the Lost Souls, though admittedly to a lesser extent. They could be anywhere. Maybe even inside of this wardrobe. I think the most visceral reaction this game ever got out of me was at this one part with the trites, which I will do a dramatic recreation of. So I'm going around shooting demons and doing stuff, and oh great, it's one of the holes these spider guys come from. Hey, I know, I'll block it with this chair. It probably won't stop them from spawning, but I bet it'll at least be funny. Ah! And of course, the boss of this area is the demonic Spider Queen. There aren't too many bosses in this game, and honestly, I guess big climactic fight scenes and slow, tense horror don't really go hand in hand. That would also explain why a lot of the weapons feel off. There's something weird going on with these guns, something very weird. I didn't do any research into it because I'm sure as hell not a professional, but I think the damage the weapons do is random, at least the shotgun. I honestly have a lot of clips that could demonstrate this, but I found a pretty good one here. I walk around this corner here and suddenly, an imp! I whip around and fire, hit him, and he dies in one hit. A bit later, I go up to this door, open it, and oh look, another imp! I fire my shotgun point blank into him, and he lives. What? I hit him in the same area, it's the same kind of enemy, just one dies and one doesn't. Another gun I have a problem with is the chain gun. Simply put, it doesn't really feel good to use. Like, this is a minigun. It should shred through enemies, but I don't know, something about this doesn't feel like it's doing a whole lot. I think it comes down to mainly the speed of the gun. Compare it to the machine gun, which it's basically meant to be a straight upgrade to. It's firing slower, and while that could work, it doesn't feel like it's doing that much damage. If the barrel spun just a bit faster, I think I wouldn't have this problem, but it doesn't, so I basically never used it. While we're on issues I had with the game, it likes to be fucking cute and spawn in enemies behind you. Like, I get it, it's supposed to shock you and keep you on your toes, but it doesn't really work. Like, yeah, the first time you suddenly get attacked and turn around to see an imp or something behind you, alright, that can give you a little jump. When it happens basically every other encounter, you just get used to it and it just gets kind of annoying. So anyways, after running around Mars for a bit, we discover, oh my god, Professor Evilman is a bad guy. Who would have guessed?
Making progress, are we? And in such a hurry to find us, to find me. There's no need to rush. I am everywhere, and everything here is mine. We thank you for warning you.
One thing I do genuinely want to compliment the game on is the graphics, because holy shit does this game look good for a 2004 game. Now yeah, I am playing on the BFG edition, which does enhance the graphics a bit, but even looking at the footage from the original game, it still looks damn good. Though it does age poorly in some areas. This skybox here looks like it's straight out of Mario 64. Anyways, we run around some more, kill some guys, go to hell, literally, and eventually the game ends in a fight with a cyber demon. Once he dies, the portals to hell finally close, you're safely recovered, and no one learns about all the people you've killed. And that is Doom 3. You know, I compared this game a few times to Dead Space, but having played it through more thoroughly, there's another game that reminds me of even more. The heavier focus on story, the physics puzzles, these little health stations. If you haven't picked up on what I'm saying yet, maybe this will help you.
Current topside temperature is 93 degrees, with an estimated high of 105. The Black Mesa compound is maintained at a pleasant 68 degrees at all times.
Now, I'm not crying foul here or anything like that. Half-Life is an incredibly influential game, and was just as much inspired by Doom as any other game at the time. I just thought it'd be neat to bring up this little cycle of inspiration, but also to just cement how different these games are. Say what you will about Half-Life, but it's very different from the first two Doom games. But with that being said, Doom 3 is still a fine game, all things considered. The story may be incredibly simple and generic, and some of the weapons may not feel the best, but most of them are pretty fun, even if their damage can feel random sometimes. The atmosphere is pretty good, and hey, I guess the game succeeded in getting me on the edge every once in a while. It's by no means a bad game, and honestly I'd recommend it. It's just you have to know what you're getting yourself into. Contrary to what some may believe, Doom 3 was very well received and sold well upon release. Yeah, there was some backlash against the change of mechanics and mood, but most people were able to look past that and see the quality game behind it. So why wasn't there ever a Doom 4? Well, that's a whole ass other story. After the success of Doom 3, Doom 4 started development, with the goal of being a remake of Doom 2, much like how Doom 3 was a remake of Doom 1. Presumably after this, Doom 5 would be a remake of Doom 3, and Doom 6 would be a remake of Doom 4. There's just one problem. When Doom 4's promotional material started coming out, people fucking hated it. If the backlash to Doom 3 was some minor civil disobedience, the backlash to Doom 4 was the LA riots. People hated the way this game was shaping up, with the phrase Call of Doom being thrown around to make fun of the game looking more like a Call of Duty game than anything Doom related. And speaking as someone who just saw them for the first time, yeah, I can kinda see where they're coming from. This backlash really made the developers pause for a bit, and eventually Doom 4 was cancelled. Development was completely reset, and the new development eventually resulted in Doom 2016. You know, I realize this video is really cut into two chunks here, games that are Doom 3 and games that aren't, but if you look at them together, they do actually reveal something a little interesting. A lot of people say that Doom 3 was a massive departure for the series, and while it was to an extent, I just don't think the tone change was as out of nowhere as everyone thinks it is. Look at Doom 64. That game absolutely tried to go for a more grim atmosphere, or some of the Doom ports to consoles like PS1, which changed the music to make the game have a darker tone. If you actually look at the Doom games that came out between 2 and 3, you'd see that this is just the path that the series was going down. Now, personally, I still prefer the older style of gameplay. Maybe one day I'll actually play them. So what's the lesson today, kids? To always fact check and do your own research instead of just going off what the popular consensus is? To not be afraid to try new and interesting things? To be more accepting of the inevitability of change? Nah, fuck that. The lesson is that giant spiders are fucking terrifying. I'm Sir Strongman, and that was the thing.